Many people will argue that cheerleading is not a sport. I am here to tell you the reasons cheerleading should be considered a sport. Competitive cheerleading is a sport. There are two different categories of cheerleading. You have teams that cheer for their school that do not compete, and you have teams that are considered competing squads. Those competing squads should be considered a sport. I will be telling you that cheerleaders practice just as long and just as hard as any other sport, the definition of sport and the elements of sport, and what it takes to be a competitive cheerleader. First of all, cheerleaders practice just as hard as any other player or on any given sport. Competitive cheerleaders practice daily as well as year-round. If there is a competition coming up, you will practice a lot longer to perfect your whole routine and make sure it looks sharp. During practice, you run, stretch, tumble, practice stunts, do cardio work, practice jumps, and practice your whole routine. Cheerleaders have to train even when they're not at practice because they have to have good endurance to be able to jump, stunt, cheer, dance, and even tumble. According to What Exercises Do Competitive Cheerleaders Do website, cheerleaders should participate in aerobic activities like rollerblading, biking, and aerobic dance classes. Secondly, the definition of sport and the elements of sport. The definition of sport is an individual or group competitive activity involving physical exertion or skill, governed by rules, and sometimes engaged in professionally. The elements of sport include teamwork, competitiveness, and athleticism. According to the article, What Makes Cheerleading a Sport, found on Livestrong.com website, cheerleading requires athleticism, competition, and teamwork, just like all the other sports. Cheerleading is a combination of dancing and gymnastics. Cheerleaders have to have muscle in order to tumble and to stunt. Stunning requires two bases, a back spot, and a flyer. The flyer has to have muscle in order to help hold her own weight and do some of the tasks that are needed up in the air. A flyer also has to be very flexible. Your bases and back spot need to be strong because they are lifting another person up into the air. Cheerleading requires a lot of trust and teamwork. The flyers are thrown about 10 feet into the air, hoping that the cheerleaders beneath them will catch them. Cheerleaders also compete and get scored on their routine. We also wear uniforms to represent our team, just like football, basketball, soccer, baseball, and volleyball players. Lastly, what it takes to be a competitive cheerleader. According to Competitive Cheerleading website, it takes excellent upper body strength, confidence, excellent physical conditioning, determination and commitment, and very good sportsmanship. Competitive cheerleading requires tryouts for new members to see if you have what it takes to be a part of their team. You have to try out for every other sport, and all those sports require you to be physically fit, just like cheerleading. You have to meet certain requirements to be a football player and a baseball player. All these sports have requirements, and you must try out for them. Cheerleading is no different. You must meet the certain requirements and try out for the team. In conclusion, these are the reasons I believe competitive cheerleading should be a sport. From personal experience, cheerleaders are very passionate and dedicated. They will compete injured if their team really needs them, just like any other sport. They know their team is relying on them, and they will do whatever it takes to make it happen. Cheerleaders get injured just as many times as football players. According to a study done by the National Center for Catastrophic Injuries, they said cheerleading is the most dangerous sport, even more dangerous than football. As you can see, cheerleading meets the required definition of being a sport, as well as the elements like teamwork, competitiveness, and athleticism.